Philip Turl joining me on the set. On the line, we have Filippo Dionigi, a senior lecturer of international relations at the University of Bristol. Hello to you, and thank you for joining the program as well. I'd like to ask you the first question, your reaction to this startling announcement from Israel's military that Hassan Nasrallah is allegedly dead.
I think we are in uncharted territory. What we can expect after this is entirely impossible to predict at this point. If it is confirmed the death of Nasrallah, it means that Hezbollah will have to regroup and nominate a new Secretary General. Most likely will be Hashem Safieddin, another leading figure of the party, but with a far less public profile, and certainly not with the charisma that Nasrallah was capable of having over the Shia population of Lebanon. What will happen next is difficult to say. What we can certainly notice for now is that the so-called axis of resistance has thus far failed to react to the attacks, or perhaps is exercising self-restraint. But at this point, it looks like much more the former than the latter, I must say. And that means that they are in a far weaker position. Israel will be tempted to capitalize on the results that they think they have achieved so far, and probably will go ahead with the operations that it has already undertaken so far with the same strength, if not even worse, actually.
Philip Turl, French Foreign Minister, says it's in contact with regional Lebanese leaders, partners, to avoid de-escalation. Should Israel be capitalizing on this Hassan Nasrallah's death, or should it be taking a time to step back, to regroup, to de-escalate?
I think it's too early to tell. I think that obviously the death of Hassan Nasrallah and this continued fighting, this conflict, these bombing raids in southern Lebanon are a huge disappointment to the international community. We've seen over the last few days at the UN General Assembly in New York how practically everybody coming to the stand has said we don't want a wider war, we want a ceasefire deal, not only with what is going on in the Gaza Strip with Hamas, but we also want a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah to stop this from spiraling into a regional conflict. The death of Hassan Nasrallah has called all of that into question now, because many are saying, well, it's probably gone too far, and the big question is, what is Iran going to do? What is Iran's reaction going to be? We've seen comments today by the Iranian spiritual leader, Ali Khamenei, saying that the Israelis are going to pay the price for what they have done. But it's a very complicated situation for Iran, because they don't really want to get involved in a widespread regional conflict. They've got too much to lose. Particularly, they want to preserve their nuclear program. They don't want to have a face-to-face confrontation with the United States, but they're going to have to react to what has happened with the death of Hassan Nasrallah, who really was the head of what is seen in Iran as being the jewel in the crown of its proxy movements, i.e. Hezbollah, more so than the Houthis in Yemen, than Hamas, and also the support for Iran in Iraq. So it's a bad day for Iran as far as its potential of keeping this resistance axis going. So a lot of questions. And I don't think, to answer your question, that this is the right time for Israel to pull out, or for Israel to take that decision to pull out, because Israel knows that it's got to wait for the reply from Iran, and possibly a reply from the remaining remnants of Hezbollah.
Yeah, Filippo, at least from the declarations I've seen from Iran's supreme leader, they're calling for Muslims to stand with Hezbollah, for the proxies to respond to Israel. But there's no mention of Hassan Nasrallah, not even a mention of him. Why do you think that is?
I think, again, the party itself, the Hezbollah themselves, have not made official declarations yet about the situation. Again, we are still relying only on the official declaration that comes from Israel. That means that we need to take them with the due, with the due diligence, of course. Although, again, before the previous declaration in similar situations were in fact later on verified. So we will see. Again, it's a situation that is unfolding. What we saw anyway, I mean, is that on the Iranian side, again, we see declarations, we see polished interviews on CNN, we see all this kind of approach, which is very rhetorical, whereas in fact, the Lebanese and their close ally Hezbollah is fighting a war on the ground and is very much suffering for the situation that is subjected to from Israel. So again, the expectation is that their intervention would be certainly far more pragmatic than simple declaration and rhetoric.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned the succession process for Hezbollah. If Nasrallah is confirmed dead, are there any chances that Hezbollah might be split over who replaces him?
No, I think this is unlikely. Hezbollah is a highly hierarchical organization. Is well organized. It has been around for almost 40 years, so it has plenty of. It has had plenty of time to plan things ahead. Nasrallah himself, in one of his latest speeches, actually mentioned the possibility that he may not be there any longer soon. So again, the party, in theory, is prepared for this kind of dynamic to take place. But again, from what we see so far, they seem overwhelmed from the situation. I don't exclude the possibility that they may find the strength to react again, and that this might be, again, a strategic choice of them to sort of withdraw underground and remain silent for a while. It happened before. During the 2006 war, it took a month before, it took several weeks at least before the then Secretary General, again, Nasrallah, would give a speech. And also in a year ago, when the Hamas attack against Israel took place, it took some time before, it took almost a month before Nasrallah officially gave a speech. So generally, they have the strategy of, when they are under attack, when situation becomes really difficult and to manage, they tend to remain relatively quiet.
Philip Turtle, what's the next step here for diplomats? We heard Netanyahu at the UN General Assembly doubling down on his operations in southern Lebanon and in Beirut. Now we hear Khamenei calling on Iran and its proxies to continue to stand with Hezbollah. How do diplomats find a way to de-escalate?
This is a very complicated situation for diplomats. There's growing frustration, as I was saying before, at the United Nations, basically because I think there's a feeling there that whatever the United States tries to do, Benjamin Netanyahu's not listening. Benjamin Netanyahu has an agenda. Whatever the US says he should do, we saw President Biden at the Tribune this week saying that a wider war is in the interests of nobody and that he was calling for a ceasefire. It falls on deaf ears. And I think that the more pressure that is stacked on Israel, the less impact that seems to have, not only by the United States, but also by the international community. We had calls for a ceasefire from not only the EU, from the US, but from 11 other nations, including the United Kingdom, saying that a ceasefire was something that was necessary. It could be introduced for 3 weeks to give time for diplomatic solutions to move forward. Well, that all seems to be swept under the carpet right now, as everyone is waiting for the reaction of Iran, waiting for what the Israelis are planning to do. I think it's important to underline something else here, William, and that is that all of this hasn't just happened on the spur of the moment. This is like something that's been being planned for weeks, for months, if not for years. There are some reports flying around that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government have been planning this since he came back to power in 2009, and were looking for the right time to move in to get rid of Hezbollah. This kind of operation where you have got bombs or explosives placed in pagers and in walkie-talkies is not something that you can do in 5 minutes. This has been very carefully planned for months. Hitting these Hezbollah operatives in their secret bunkers underground and killing them is something you don't do without the necessary information that you've been given a long time ahead so that you can carefully plan it. So I think it has to be stressed that whatever's happening on the international scene, whatever's been going on in the United Nations, the decision to go in and to knock Hezbollah out of action had probably already been taken before this week's General Assembly meeting in the United Nations. And it just had to be a one specific moment when that agreement was given, okay, now you have to go in and do this. Because for the Israelis. These bombing raids just in recent days into Israeli territory, the fact that Hezbollah has said all the way down the line, we're going to carry on doing this until there is a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. There's no ceasefire coming, despite efforts by the United States to get that ceasefire signed. 10 trips to the region by Antony Blinken to no avail. That is where we are right now. So it's very hard to see what the international community can do, apart from just keep saying, pull back, take it easy, don't get involved in any more raids or anything like that can cause a much wider war. But we're one step closer to that now with the death of Hassan Nasrallah.
And Filippo, when we look at Lebanon, a country that's been mired in crisis in recent years, if the Israelis took years, weeks, months to plan these operations and used what they said were precision strikes, after a week of escalation, we have a death toll in Lebanon above 700. We have tens of thousands of displaced. So there are going to be a lot of people raising an eyebrow about how carefully planned these strikes were, weren't there?
No, I agree. I mean, obviously these are plans that have been designed and prepared in advance. But what Israel cannot do is to predict the future, and no one really can at this point. And the situation is extremely unpredictable. Lebanon is a divided country. There'll be parties in Lebanon that will try to get the most out of the weakness of Hezbollah at this point. I don't exclude, I know this is going to be a controversial, but I don't exclude that there might be also the possibility of, internal clashes within Lebanon as a consequence of, the weakening of Hezbollah and the consequence of the attack that Israel is perpetrating.
Could you explain that point, please?
Well, it's difficult to imagine, but consider that Lebanon is very divided politically. And whereas it's true that there is part of the Lebanese population, especially the Shia community, not necessarily all of it, of course, that support Hezbollah and see value in the Hezbollah cause because Hezbollah has had a role in relieving them from a phase of marginality in the Lebanese history. On the other hand, there are other factions, other groups in Lebanon, say those who subscribe mostly to the Christian confessional groups and those who belong more to the Sunni community, that may try to take advantage of this situation and try to finally regain the power that they lost against the hegemony of Hezbollah within Lebanon in this situation. And that can cause tension, if not clashes within, as a result of this situation. And Israel will, if Israel proceeds and continues with the attacks that has perpetrated up until this point, then this situation may unfold, and they may not necessarily be able to control it, of course, right? I'm just saying this is a possible scenario. It's not necessarily what's going to happen, but again, a very dangerous one and one that is very hard to predict.
Right, a lot of uncertainty in Lebanon. Before we even look at the broader picture, Philip, we heard from the U.S. government today, Joe Biden instructing the Pentagon to reassess the U.S. military postures in the Middle East and adjust if necessary. What does that mean?
Well, I think it's very difficult to imagine that the U.S. is going to send in ground troops right now. We're right in the middle of an election campaign in the United States.
Neither candidate wants to see this.
Neither candidate wants to see that happen. And one of the pledges that Joe Biden made was to pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan, which he did. Remember the mess that turned out to be. I really don't think that just in the last few weeks of his time in office, Joe Biden is going to agree to send U.S. troops to the Middle East to try to calm down the situation and control the situation there. This is no nice present either for Kamala Harris if she wins the presidency on November the 5th. She will inherit an extremely difficult, complicated situation that is going to be very hard to unravel. This, I think, from the Israeli point of view, would be much better if it were Donald Trump who was elected to the White House. I think Benjamin Netanyahu feels galvanized by the thought that Donald Trump could still win the presidency of the United States, and therefore he would get a green card to do more or less what he liked afterwards. So all of this is made with political calculations down the line. But I think the bottom line that you have to stress here, William, is that the situation in southern Lebanon right now and he also in the Gaza Strip shows a tremendous failure of international diplomacy. The world has been incapable for years of trying to solve this solution, incapable of trying to install the UN Resolution 1701 after the war of 2006. That resolution pushed Hezbollah back to the north of the Litani River, quite a long distance away from the blue line border between Lebanon and Israel. It also pushed out any incursion by Israeli troops into southern Lebanon, and it put UN peacekeeping troops in that region to stop these attacks by Hezbollah over the border and to keep the peace in that region, which would have been the ideal solution. The problem was, after that resolution was drawn up, the international community completely failed to abide by that and to make sure it became operational. And as a result of that, we're in the situation we're in today.
A failure of international diplomacy. Meanwhile, Filippo, the media's attention again diverted from Gaza, from the humanitarian crisis there, and from the hostages that are still being held there as well.
Yes, correct. I mean, Israel, I think, has succeeded in decoupling the conflict. The war that Hezbollah started against Israel on the 8th of October 2023 was a war that would have defined of support, of solidarity for the people of Gaza, right? At this point, instead, the Israeli army is directing its focus more clearly towards Lebanon, and with that also the media have shifted their attention. The reality, however, remains that with a ceasefire in Gaza, Hezbollah had declared that it would have ceased their hostilities towards the northern of Israel, which is what Israel nominally has been trying to achieve with its attack on Hezbollah now. That didn't happen. For the reasons that we know, and as a result, now we have an exacerbation of the conflict that is bringing in and affecting Lebanon at this point, with the risk that may become even regionalized and get even harsher than what we witnessed so far.
Filippo, thank you very much for your time. Filippo Diniigi from the University of Bristol. Also, I want to thank our foreign editor, Philip Turtle, joining me on this set. Just a reminder, no confirmation yet if Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed. That information coming only from the Israeli Defense Forces.